Kaer Morhen to Nilfgaard. Welcome to another episode of the podcast Surprise. This time, we're back under different circumstances, and we're really excited because how long did we wait for this? 2 years? 2 years to cover The Witcher Season 2. We're really, really excited to be here. And yeah, The Witcher Season 2 was great. We're going to be covering the first 2 episodes of The Witcher Season 2, A Grain of Truth, one of my favorite episodes of the season, and also Kaer Morhen. We get introduced to some really, really great characters. Of course, if you haven't been introduced to the podcast Surprise, we're a dual podcast. We have a podcast on YouTube and also on anchor.fm, where you can find the link in the description of the video. Basically, we're linked to all sorts of different podcast platforms. And yeah, we have a bunch of different episodes. We actually covered the first 2 books for those of you that are getting into the books. And now we're going to be covering the show. Are we excited, guys? We've been waiting so long for this, right?
Yeah. I don't speak for everyone else, but yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. I don't have a sound effect for yeah, but you know.
I can say I don't speak for everybody else, but yeah, you're all excited.
And Michal, of course, you get it.
Oh, yeah. No, I wasn't waiting for this.
Before we get started, a big shout out to Morley, who generously is throwing a coin to my 3 favorite YouTubers. Love all 3 of you with my heart, all of my heart. Thank you for always bringing us fabulous content. And she also threw a super sticker our way. So $70 donation from Morley. Anybody else that's joining us from all over the continent, like we said, Temeria, Nilfgaard, Kaer Morhen, or you're in Povis, we're really, really happy that you're here. And yeah, we're going to kind of do a dual episode today. That's how we're going to be doing our format going forward. We're going to do 4 episodes of covering and reviewing the episodes, and then we'll kind of do a big season wrap up. So technically 5 episodes of covering the season 2 of The Witcher. And the next time you come check out the podcast, we'll do episodes 3 and 4. But for today, episodes 1 and 2, and they're both great episodes, guys. Really, really started off the season with great atmosphere, dialogue, and introduction into new characters.
Also, just to add to what you're saying there, Kyle, my apologies that we didn't get our Nilfgaard episode done before the season, but it's going to fit in very well at the end of the season, sort of expand what we learned. It actually works out pretty well. So hopefully we'll have not just those episodes dropping, but then, you know, what I think is the first ever scripted Witcher podcast episode in the history of the universe. So, hey, that'll be cool. So lots of great things coming. We're all fired up because of all this new content. So let's roll with it.
Yeah, and just to kind of get into it, a lot of you have been asking for different types of videos. We're going to have all sorts of cool videos coming up, of course. Like I said, if you want to check out our podcast, just look in the description of the video. Tons and tons of content for you guys to check out. So where should we start, friends? Podcast Surprise. How should we kind of jump into this? We got A Grain of Truth. We covered this episode. This is one of the first episodes we ever covered on the podcast. One of our favorite short stories because it has such a great depth to it, and it has interesting characters like the character of Nivellen. What are we supposed to do about this? We've been saying
that was a real curveball, man. They're like, Nivellen, like, what? That's how you say it? Like, oh man,
forget it. I'm turning the season off. This is all ruined.
They got us good there.
Yeah. Let's kind of jump into it. Let's go, Aziz.
Okay, so this was tied for the highest rated episode. You know, IMDb ratings, you know, it's just for fun. It's not a be all end all. It's not some final say, but it's a kind of a neat thing to look at. It comes in at 8.7, and it'll be neat to see if that changes, because this is obviously, it's only been 22 days since this episode's been out, so it's not even been out a month. So things will change. People will watch it again, maybe revise their opinion, maybe not, but this is very good. I think when they do an episode that sticks to the books, they do it really well. Now, I'm not someone who thinks that every episode has to stick to the books. It's not possible to do that. I'm not a stickler for that, but I do really like when they're able to. And this was really well done because it mingled. It was a good combination of what they're going for, which was updating the material, making it work a little better for the screen, fitting in the existing characters that weren't there, because A Grain of Truth, second short story ever, didn't even have Ciri or Yennefer, who probably didn't even exist or only were seeds in Sapkowski's mind at that point. So they do it really well when they're trying to combine. I find that they do that really well. Like they combine the old stuff with the new stuff really well. It blends in a way that's efficient and allows you to have fun with what you already know while being introduced to some new stuff. So, it doesn't always work, but it worked really well here.
Yeah, what were your thoughts on that, Michal? Because we're going to talk about this too. We'll talk a little bit about later about episode 2 specifically about the Eskel stuff because Lauren Hissrich had a really good Twitter thread on that, and she made her explanations. Like, because there's a lot of book fans who are expecting a 1-to-1 adaptation, and we're book fans, but we are also under the expectation that there is going to be changes for an adaptation. So, Michal, we obviously talked about this privately. We're we're in a podcast together, so let's kind of enlighten everyone on what your thoughts are about having Ciri in this story too, which is a really another interesting element and kind of curveball for us.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked this episode. I wasn't sure if I was going to, because if you've listened to our episode on The Grain of Truth or any of the other episodes in which Kyle reminds everyone that I don't like Nivellen, I don't like Nivellen. And I have some issues with that story. So I wasn't going in convinced that I was going to be persuaded by it, but I actually really was. I thought it was a really strong opening episode. They did a lot of great thematic stuff. Just setting the table with the idea of monsters and what makes a monster and who feels like a monster because of their actions and all that. And yeah, I thought Christopher Hughes was amazing. He really sunk his teeth into the role.
And his tusks.
Yeah. And yeah,
it was a real bore of a role, wasn't it?
Heyo.
But yeah, it hit emotionally in the right places. The Verina stuff was very effective. I thought, yeah, I really liked it.
Yeah, just super good. The all the different elements, the acting, the storytelling, the setup for future episodes, which is not a part of the original short story. It doesn't really set up much. It just tells you, here's stuff happening in the world. Here's more about Geralt, which, as I said before, was because it was also new and not fleshed out. This is like a fleshed out version. And wow, just there isn't a lot of the other stuff. The Fringilla and Yennefer stuff is more present in the second episode. It starts here. We can, parse that and talk about it later. Because the Grain of Truth stuff was really well over half of the episode, but it was also a very long episode. It was over an hour. So they got to do a lot of different things. And I totally agree about Verina. Super well done, ultra creepy, but not just creepy, like heartrending, like you feel sad, which was an important element of the original short story. So I thought, just
her saying to Ciri, "You're a lot like me." That's like, what I mean?
Yeah.
So that there's a lot of elements that we're going to talk about. And that's kind of what we do in the podcast, Surprise, guys. In case you're new here, we talk about different story elements, the craft. We try to analyze the characters and their actions. We talk about, obviously, the setting that they're into. There's a lot of different locations. So we try to we'll have some of our podcast format, but we're also kind of, a little bit more chill with the show vibes too.
We don't have the big long synopsis at the beginning. I don't think it's necessary because a lot of it's similar to the show, to the books. But we are going to be fairly thorough in breaking down the plot. And there's no herb lore, but
before we really jump into it, Aziz, another thing that I thought was really awesome, that courtyard fight was absolutely fantastic. Of course, in the first episode ever of The Witcher, we got the lesser evil stuff, and that's one of my favorite episodes. That's probably my favorite short story, other than The Last Wish. But I was really impressed by the CGI, like Verina, her vampire form, and Geralt using 2 signs in this episode. We'll talk a little bit about that, Axie and Ard. The CGI, you could tell, definitely leveled up, right? We kind of knew critics harped on that. And there was some criticisms, and they should have been open because, there was some things that definitely could have been done better. But now, they got, I believe it was the Mandalorian team working on The Witcher. They got that money now to do that. And I thought it was a huge improvement. We'll talk about that in episode 2 too, because there was some really great CGI there as well.
Yeah. So to touch on what you're saying there about her friendliness towards Ciri, I thought that was the creepiest part of all. If we want to talk about Verina for a second, since we started on her, definitely the CGI was awesome on her. It was a really good fight. To me, the fight is like gravy. Like, it's never going to make or break the episode, but when it's good, it sure does help. It sure does help a lot, and this was cool because it just shows how otherworldly she is and how much she is part monster, but has recognizable human emotions that we normally celebrate, right? Like true love is a theme here, and that's supposed to be a good thing, but it's sort of a good thing because it breaks the curse, but mostly it's a bad thing because well, I don't know how you want to frame it, but it's certainly not simple.
I don't know if most relationships have someone letting someone else feed on them for blood.
Not literally. But there's definitely toxic relationships.
Verina had those eyes too. In her costume, her eyes were similar to like, eyes are something definitely that I focus on in The Witcher. We obviously have Vesemir. Like you focus on his eyes and all of his scenes when he's talking, because obviously Witcher's eyes and part of their physical appearance, that's something that gets altered. But that was something that was creepy about her that I just wanted to say. I was like, oh, okay, like I was like, whoa, you know what I mean? That made she looked like a vampire. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I was saying to you guys when we were discussing it offline, like if it's hard to put it this way, but like if vampires were real, I feel like that's what vampires would look like. Like not the cape, not the whatever, just like that sort of like weird, like beautiful, but also like
not like handsome, like Elvis Presley with slick back hair.
Yeah, and just like yeah.
Yeah, not like some count or something. Yeah,
like looks human but doesn't move humans.
Yeah, and like
humans sometimes, but
and like the bat kind of sound behind her, and like that purring that they used. It was like very. Yeah, it was really evocative, I thought.
Yeah, it really shows the otherworldliness.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god, I was literally just gonna say otherworldly, her otherworldly
nice.
Power. Because her screech, Geralt literally has to shield himself with Ard, and I keep on talking about Ard because I love The Witcher 3. Anyways,
it's like that moment where she crawls up and before Ciri wakes up and she just like tastes her tear and she's like, that's pretty good. It's like, that's just, there's no intent of violence there. She's not trying to hurt Ciri, and in fact, she's trying to befriend her, and that's just creepier because like you said, Kyle, the fact that she's like, you're kind of like me. She says, I've never met anyone alone in the heart like you, different, not one of many. And it's like, yeah, that's good because there's nothing like that in the books. But Ciri, and they're trying to raise Ciri's profile as very different. There's stuff in her. I mean, she's not evil, but like Verina is arguably, but there's parts of her that are dark that other people see and identify, and that's a problem because most people who are going to identify that in her are going to want to use it for their own ends in one way or another.
So let's jump to the start of the episode, guys. We have Geralt and Ciri on the road. And in dangerous circumstances, because we know how powerful Ciri is and we know people are looking for her, and we get a nice little conversation there.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a good setup, and they're bringing up some of the things that are going to be present throughout the season, like facing fear and talking about nightmares. That's a really big deal, and it's pretty cool to the book. Like it's similar to the intro to the short story version where he just stumbles across a dead merchant and his daughter and their stuff and is like, okay, well, this is weird because no one stole anything. Like there's all this good stuff here they didn't take. So that's pretty similar to them going into the town and finding it abandoned and being killed by Verina there. So it's pretty good. It's also kind of similar to the opening of Nightmare on the Wolf, by the way, where we start off with merchants getting killed. But we got
quite a bit of Nightmare of the Wolf stuff, which we'll talk about in episode 2 for sure.
It pops up a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of connections, but you're right, especially episode 2.
Traveling on the continent, never a great idea.
So one small change, I guess, is that Geralt was hired by Nivellen's dad to kill wyverns, which is, whatever. That makes some sense. And Nivelle, he's good to him. He treats him like a little kid. So it's kind of like, I don't know, did that read sort of like a little bit of setup for how he was good to boy Nivellen, which is like a lead-in to how he's treating Ciri, but obviously the circumstances are way different. But having a soft spot for kids and the way they're, he doesn't want the dad to like go off on his son, so he steps in and is like, yeah, your son did this and all that.
And then he turns into a monster, which King Roman says, I am a big fan of monsters, and this episode delivered my favorite of the series. So thank you very much for your donation, Roman. We really, really appreciate you.
I appreciate that.
A king as well.
So backing up though to Geralt and Ciri on the road, I wanted to say this. There's that line, your father didn't know what he was giving up. It's like, well, about that. He sort of didn't, but he didn't really intend on giving you up, did he?
He might have known more than he was letting on. A lot more.
Quite a lot more.
We also get a discussion about Kaer Morhen. We get a lot of that because obviously Ciri's inquisitive and Geralt kind of wants to let her know what's going on there. And I thought that was a really nice setup too, because when Ciri gets to Kaer Morhen, it's just a bunch of men. We'll talk about that, but I really enjoyed that part of the conversation too, because it gives us a little bit of insight in how important it is to Geralt. And
so. How the unavoidable Game of Thrones comment, how similar was the dialogue's entirely different, but the point was very similar. The facing your fear discussion was very similar to Ned and Bran's, opening, one of the first scenes they ever had about fear. You can only be brave when you're afraid, that kind of thing. That had a very similar vibe to me, and I really appreciate it because that's one of, that's a really important conversation that all young people need to have, a lot of adults too. It's just a big part of human existence. We all have fear, and we don't all face monsters, maybe not literally, but figuratively, sure. So it's pretty valuable, I think, in the real world to have that.
It's a good reality check for Ciri because she is a princess from Cintra. There's going to be a hard road ahead, and we do see that. Obviously her training in Kaer Morhen and whatnot, but it's a good setup for that. And Geralt's like, listen, the world is a hard place, and we're going to be encountering monsters. I'm a Witcher, and things are not going to get easier here. So it's like, I really enjoyed that part of it as well.
Yeah, go
ahead, Michal.
Sorry, something that stuck out to me from that conversation. Well, two things. Is one, we start the pattern of occasionally Geralt calling Ciri Cirilla.
Yeah.
Which
using the kid's full name.
Yeah, it felt very dad to me. Like, this is important.
Felt possessive, right? Like a possessive, like I'm your dad.
Yeah. But also she, when Ciri wakes up and talks about her dream, I think she says that, she's talking about what happened to Cintra, and she says that she was too helpless to stop any of it. And looking back, like, that actually is really her thesis for the whole season, that she is kind of that idea of being helpless is going to drive her, like, all of her actions going forward. And I thought it was really cool that they just kind of like slip that in there at the beginning.
Why she pushes herself so much throughout the season too.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, you're right. As soon as that door opens to her, she charges headlong through. Like, she doesn't want to leave her sword.
We'll talk a lot about that.
I eat with my sword.
Yeah, we'll talk a lot about that because at the end episode, when we get that awesome scene with Geralt handing Ciri a sword, then we have. Oh, okay, sorry. Go ahead, Aziz.
I was gonna say the Nivellen, rather Verina, and the mention of the Wild Hunt here are like early setups for what Ciri is facing as well. You were totally right to mention, like, she wants to protect herself and she's seeing the need for that. And Geralt finally does too. But everywhere they go, people want her, not just for their power, but in this case, Verina, she has this camaraderie and desire to be around her for reasons other than her great power, but it's still obviously a problematic situation. But it's like a build up to all the people that want to try to take hold of her. The Wild Hunt, Emir, yeah, exactly. So there's just all these different directions, so they got to kind of bring them in one at a time. And I like starting slow with that, just showing how even people who aren't interested in her for her power, they still are drawn to her, whether they're the different, and that's a theme all throughout the season. You got monsters just coming for her or coming near her, at which she's partly, quote unquote, responsible for.
Yeah, she's a big part of the prophecy of Ithleen, which we hear about. Yeah. And then we next we have Geralt and Ciri heading to meet Nivellen. It's pretty similar to the book intro.
Yeah, the angry house, him charging out, and yeah, it was cool. Yeah. Do you love the guys? You guys love the food just falling from the ceiling. That's really, like, I was really wondering how they were going to do that. And they're like, yeah, okay, that works.
So we have some pretty interesting conversations that start here, Michal. The start of some whimsical conversations. We start to learn a lot about Geralt's history too, which is awesome. But a lot about Nivellen.
Yeah, I mean, so we have the the stuff with Nivellen kind of, he dwells a little bit less on his being like a weak-chinned weakling that he does in the book, but he definitely, it's interesting like getting to see him like perform that story for Ciri, as opposed to like just kind of, hello Geralt, nice to meet you, here's my life story, you know.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, you're right, it is better. By the way, you can't do weak chin with Christopher Hivju anyway.
No,
so.
he has a very strong chin.
Yeah, it's let's talk a little bit about the curse too.
Cool. Yeah, the curse is really interesting. I think it's Geralt says there's a mighty power in love and blood, and these are some of the stuff we talked about the short story. These are stuff that were carried over very well, and it's really powerful. It's really evocative, and it sets up really well some of the other things that are going to happen on the grander scale with some of the other characters. Yeah, mostly with Ciri, but
love and blood are so important to Ciri because she literally has elder blood in here, and her and the Geralt, the whole Law of Surprise thing. Geralt's going to be showing his love for Ciri and having to protect her throughout the whole series. So, kind of a plot. There is a lot of mirroring I find in this season, like those kind of like you might think little things like that, the love and blood curse, like those things that are kind of mirrored between, kind of that thread that goes throughout different plot lines.
Yeah, and quick shout out to a couple of things they included really nicely from the books was like Roach's role in this episode was like it was in the short story. Roach does a lot as Roach's like time to shine, right? Especially given they kill her off later, or one of them, and like Roach gave warning in the short story. I really appreciate that. Like, and this one, Roach is like nudging Geralt all of a sudden, like, dude, check it out, and he's like, oh yeah, let me check it out. And I appreciate that, along with the really nice work in of the story of Lara and Creganon, which is really cool to follow the elders. It's told like a fairy tale, and it's a really good way to introduce that story with the lights and the lamp and the music. Just that was super well done. I didn't see that coming, but it fit perfectly. What did y'all think of that?
Go ahead, Michal.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the the backstory and just the way Ciri's kind of drawn to it, and isn't like nobody comments on like you're drawn to this story, but it's kind of evident that she is. And I thought, that was a really good way of setting up the season. There's a lot of stuff in the season that goes directly to the myth and the lore of The Witcher, and like I felt very glad for Kyle. He couldn't walk 2 steps without hearing about the conjunction of spheres in this season.
It's funny. One of the first messages to me, because Aziz watched it like 5 or 6 days later after me and Michal were done watching, and Michal goes, "Kyle, this is your season. Conjunction of spheres, mythology, all this shit." I'm like, yes, Ishrid and Samuel Tarly. Like you should have seen our conversations. Like Michal would send one message and I would send 7. Like that's how excited I was.
One thing I kind of wish, I kind of wish Geralt had I thought the conversation where he talks about the the temple, trashing the temple, it was really interesting on one level because having read the books after I watched season 1, it was very interesting to see kind of how they change things to be a little bit more like unsexist and less problematic. So when Nivellen leaves out the fact that he, raped the priestess, which is part of the story, in the short story, I was like, oh, okay, I guess they left out that part. And then to bring it back at the end was really interesting. I do kind of wish that they had included, I think Geralt says he's like, oh yeah, the temple of the lion-headed spider. And Geralt's like, oh no, that's a really bad one. Don't do that one.
yeah, because
for some reason that line stuck with me. I wish it had been in there. Yeah.
I was like, what are god flesh mushrooms? I don't want them.
You bring up a really
nothing about this is good.
No.
You bring up a really excellent point though, Michal, and we kind of, obviously we love kind of having you as especially when there's stuff happening to women, we love having a woman's voice on the podcast for this kind of stuff. And I think that having a woman judge Nivellen, like having Ciri there rejecting Nivellen after he says, hey, You know what I mean? Like, this is a
Good
really
point.
bad thing. Not just because Geralt's the one that ends up rejecting him in the end, right? Like, Geralt goes on his, adventure and leaves Nivellen there. I was gonna say Michalin.
That's pretty good.
But you know what?
This is what I
think
put up with, guys.
but I feel that that is so much more powerful for Ciri to do, because it is an issue of rape, and what Nivellen did was obviously terrible. He leaves his villagers to die to Verina, but this is something that's part of his curse. So I feel like it makes the moment even stronger because we didn't have Ciri in this moment in the books.
That's a great point. Yeah, having her there, that's really true. Yeah.
We could get into the morality of Nivellen if you want now. Like, I think that is a really
good spot for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing that they do with him, because they have him very remorseful. Like, in the story, he's not really. He's just kind of like, well, I have this weird situation.
Yeah, you're right. He's only a little bit remorseful there. It's like
kind of makes light of it. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, fantastical about it.
Yeah. Here he's explicit. Ciri keeps trying to forgive him by proxy, and he's like, nope, I don't deserve it. Nope.
But Geralt's definitely more apprehensive, though. It's like, you need to learn a little bit more, Ciri. Like,
he also is just suspicious. Geralt's suspicious of what's going on there. Like,
sure.
What is all this? Where Ciri?
Rightly so. He ends up saving him in Ciri. So
yeah, but I think what's really interesting is that, like, they don't necessarily condemn Nivellen, or the story doesn't, I don't think, for like the rape. I mean, they do condemn him for the rape, but I felt like his punishment as, being this lonely creature in a castle, was kind of his opportunity to be better than that, to like improve upon himself and whatever, and he just so blatantly fails at doing that because he's so afraid of being alone. So he ignores all of the stuff that happens to the villagers. Someone mentioned this in the comments, and it's totally true. I think that's kind of his main crime, that he lets Verina go crazy and kill all the villagers, and he doesn't give a shit because he doesn't want to be alone. And that is like a really interesting twist on it. And I also just thought it was an extremely powerful moment once, when he admits to raping the priestess, and Geralt and Ciri both like go ice cold, and it's like,
the music changes.
Over.
It's just like, whoa, they like, Ciri was, like I said, trying to forgive him, like trying to be like, no, you're not as bad as you say, but then she doesn't have another word to say. She just like turns around, she's like, oh, okay, then. She also didn't know about the villagers. She knew about the servants, but she forgave him for that because she said, look, you just woke up as a monster, didn't know what you were, didn't know your strength. Like, that might be forgivable, even if you don't forgive yourself for that. But even she can't forgive him for these two things.
Let's talk about this. Nivellen wallowing in his self-recrimination. Let's talk about this awesome quote here. I have it quoted, or have it highlighted here. Really awesome quote from the episode.
The monsters are born of deeds done. Monsters are born of deeds done, unforgivable ones, which is something that Nivellen himself says. It's a lot more self-aware than he would be, I think, in the short story. It's really sad because he almost gets it, like
he does, yeah.
And I kind of wonder, like, if, like, what the situation would have been if he had admitted to Geralt and Ciri, like, the reason why he was actually cursed was because he raped the priestess. If he had come clean about that and admitted to his wrongdoing right up front, if they would have reacted in the same way, I think part of it is just that, like, he kind of felt like it was his secret to keep, and it's just objectively not.
I think part of it too is it's part of protecting Verina as well, because he doesn't want them to, find out more. He's happy to see them go because of her, even though he's battling himself on that, because, as you said, he's so lonely, and he's only recently become less lonely because of Verina. But it really goes to show, there's a statement on how powerful loneliness is to people. Like, people will do really bad stuff because of intense loneliness, not just to others, but to themselves. Because as Nivellen is maybe, is hard on himself. He's perhaps, there's certainly issues with the way he frames himself, but he's not light on himself. He's not forgiving himself. That's for sure, So you're right that the remorse is much more pronounced in the show than in the story, and Christopher Hivju sells it so well too. He's just acting, like you said at the beginning, Michal. That's a huge part of it, is he's really good in this role. Like back and forth between being like haphazard, happy, and goofy to tragic. Like that's hard to do. Like, but it's also something the Witcher novels do really well in general. Like the going from silly to tragic on a turn of a dime, and then back again. That's something I just always really like about the Witcher.
I had a conversation with a couple of non-book reader friends, and they said, well, they fell for Nivellen because he was such a charming character. You know what I mean? And Christopher Hivju is such a charming guy himself, so that's why he was perfect for the role. But it's like, you know, obviously isolation can do a lot to the human mind. There's studies on that, and loneliness is a very, very terrible thing. You know, we've all experienced a little bit of loneliness in our lives, but like long experiences of that can lead to something like this, where you let a vampire feed off you, and then it leads to a whole nother situation where, you know, Nivellen is literally letting all the villagers get killed by a vampire. And, you know what I mean? So it's like this it's chaos essentially with no magic, even though he is being entranced.
Yeah. Another important line here, a couple of what's it like being alone because of who you are? And framed with that is this ever growing and present question of monster versus human. What makes a monster is deeds, like you said. The quote is really perfect. But I don't think that theme is explored so front and center as much as this episode, except maybe the episode 1 of first season, where it's a front and center from the other direction with Renfri. So with her line like, if I'm a monster, then why aren't you using your silver sword on me, Geralt? You know, things like that. So it's like reframing that here at the beginning of the season as an important centerpiece of Witcherdom. So I appreciate that.
I kind of thought Ciri had her own Renfri moment with Verina at the end also, like when Verina's head gets cut off, and you know, like Renfri is the girl in the woods will be with you forever. Like the when Verina tells her I don't remember exactly what she says, but she's like, he'll come after you too, and it's that kind of like prophetic, you know, thing.
Ooh. Well said, because as you say that, I realize another important connection there too which is when Verina has this really powerful line, says, don't run. I can't help myself if you run. And it's really powerful because she's sad. She's like, please don't. Like, I really, really don't want to kill you, but I won't be able to help myself. And she's like fighting herself. And it's really like, ooh, it's really moving. And remember when Renfri and Geralt have a similar exchange, he's like, stop, Renfri, stop. If we start fighting, I won't be able to stop. Right. And that's,
that's awesome.
That's really well done.
But it also should, like, you know, Ciri, we see Ciri's naivete in this episode too. Like, it doesn't matter if she was a monster, she loved you. And then like that's part of the awesome kind of start off. And that's why I actually really love Ciri, this inclusion in this adaptation of it, is because like it really starts to begin the kind of lesson of Ciri learning how dangerous the continent is.
Yeah,
from Geralt's perspective.
And more than it should be, though. Even Geralt's like, what the hell? Like, this is, I told you it was dangerous out here, but this is more than I thought.
That's a Bruxa. Like, Bruxa being like one of the high level things that could kill a Witcher pretty easily. Like, if it wasn't Geralt, like, the other Witcher might have been dead and Ciri might be dead. You know what I mean?
That's a good
like,
point. Yeah, you need a
like Cohen, Lambert, Askel, maybe Vesemir,
okay.
maybe one.
Put some respect on my boy Cohen, okay?
I said Cohen. He was the first one I mentioned.
I'm saying he'd be fine. I'm just
Well, speaking of Witchers, that's a good lead into their drinking contest where the subject comes up, which also continues the love theme. It's important you bring up Yennefer, who was not a part of this short story originally, because again, she wasn't created, so she was woven in very well. Geralt said, Nivellen is like, what changed you? And he says, who? Yennefer of Vengerberg. And he's like, well, what happened to her? She's like, she's dead a few days ago, which is, I didn't think of it at the time. That's about to be where Nivellen is. He's about to have lost his love, like a day later from that scene. But there's some real, it's another good example of heaviness framed with silliness. Like Geralt's like, they're throwing daggers at playing a drinking game. Like, that's kind of goofy, but not in a bad way, but like it's lighthearted. And Geralt's making these facial expressions because he's like, why am I missing? Like, what the hell's going on here? I don't miss. I'm the damn Witcher, man. So he knows something's up and he plays along. But then there's this line where Nivellen's like, you're turned into monsters to fight other monsters. And Geralt's like, that's not going to happen to her. And then what do we have happen? Like this plot line where she wants to inject herself with the with the mixture that Triss and Vesemir work up, and is like, it almost did happen to her, Geralt.
Yeah, it's also, I think it encapsulates like the contradictions of Nivellen very well, because like he is, great, jovial, genuinely in love with Verina, all this stuff, but there is a real dark side and a real like there's a lot of stuff he keeps in shadow that he kind of, I think he almost uses his obvious monstrousness to hide that. And like it that scene to me, like with him playing a trick on Geralt like that so that he could just get all the information without having to answer any questions himself, is like, that's not the worst thing anyone's ever done, but it has a kind of lack of trust in it, and given that they're his guests and Geralt is already on edge about Ciri being safe there. I think it definitely has a dark tone to it.
This kind of jumping around, by the way, is something that Andrzej Sapkowski is a master at, and it's continued out throughout the whole series. And it's part of why the Witcher book series is one of my all-time favorites. I highly encourage everyone who hasn't read the books to get into them. But like, it's just, I feel like it, especially in this short story, it's reflected because of the character in Nivellen. He's a charming character. And then we see, obviously, the whole tragic backstory of it. It's like, whoa, your eyes really get open to it. It's like, it feeds you little bits of it, and then it really kind of explodes at the end. And you're like, oh, okay, this is what's really going on here. Sapkowski is so good at that.
Yeah, very true. Well said. A couple other little tidbits here. More about the moment where she dies, which is just really well done. You have Hivju's
that went on for a while.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. Right. But he does the right thing. That's one. You got it. Like you said, there's a lot of extremes here. He does some really bad stuff, but he also, like, when it really matters most, he does the right thing. In this in this moment, obviously there's things in the past that he's been on the opposite of being the worst possible thing. But yeah, he says free. This is what you call free. It's like, ooh, yeah, ouch. And then when you have lines like, it doesn't matter if she was a monster, she loved you. And I'm like, ooh, that makes it harder. So yeah, just really powerful, man. Just really good.
There was some creepy moments still, like Verina pulling herself forward, like she was in the movie 300 or something, had a spear in her, and like just like you know what I mean, and then her head twist, and then obviously we get Geralt beheading her, and then the head doing twitchy things. So the whole thing was well done. It was just like right until the end.
Well, it's a great contrast, right? Like that you couldn't get any less human than somebody being impaled on a spear, turning themselves around and like pulling themselves up the spear, and yet she's motivated in that by love, which is obviously a very human thing. So
and it's proven, and that's what it's so the Geralt's reaction, Geralt's facial expressions in this episode in particular are strong. Like he's super good at in general, especially in this role, Henry Cavill, because it's really required in this role. But he, like, when the curse is broken, Geralt's almost sad. Like, you notice his head drops because he realizes for the curse to have been broken, it must have been true love. And so that's like really bitter. He's like, okay, so they really were truly in love. And that's why it's like, oh, so that's why they bring up this point of free. Is this what you call free? He's like, now I've lost everything, maybe it's better for the world, but now I'm in my own personal hell. And he sees how it could have kept going. Like, yeah, it was evil to like kill the villagers for sure. But the thing is, she could keep feeding off of him and he wasn't going to die because he would just regenerate. Like that's why that was implied by how he kept trying to kill himself and he couldn't. Like it would just, part of the curse was that he would come back. So she could just feed on him forever. She was never going to like kill him or turn him or anything.
Huh.
So that's
Again,
probably in the
it's
back
that
of
kind
his
of
head.
it's
But
that
having that for
blindness.
eternity, having that for eternity is like kind of messed up though, right, Michal? Like I don't know, like it's not something.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't go for it, but like it's pretty, so I don't know. Whatever, man.
And if you're terribly lonely, I don't know, it might appeal.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I mean, it really emphasizes the tragedy of it because Nivellen really is so close to having everything be okay, and like he just really he never gets there. He just allowing I guess the cruelty that motivated him to rape the priestess to manifest in his lack of care for the people who are under his protection is like, I love how we keep coming back to like that just being like a really impossible sin to get around.
One thing that I also love is the whole true love thing was Mousak told me of a hedgehog man who was cured by true love.
And he says, Nivellen says, maybe he was worthy. I'm like, oh no, he's not. And it wasn't true love that cured him either. There's a lot of, you got that story pretty wrong there, y'all.
He's something.
He's something. He was a hedgehog man. That part's true.
We won't talk too much about that right now. That's for later episodes.
That
but I
is
thought I'd
later.
sprinkle that in.
So
I love how that's like put, already seated in here. It's a thread I'm really excited to follow through this season and going forward.
So shout out to Christopher Hivju and Agnes Bourne. That was the actress playing Verina. She's kind of a new on the scene. She doesn't have a lot of credits, but her first role was in a production called Monster. So there you go.
When we do after we're done our 4 initial episodes, we're going to be doing 2 episodes per pod. We're going to have a big season wrap up, and we'll have a little section for like MVPs and stuff like that. That'll be kind of fun and chat. You can get into that too. These are 2 in consideration for a single episode MVP. I think like really, really well done.
Yeah.
Well, the 2 highest rated by IMDb, which of course we aren't bound by that at all, but just for reference, are the first and last episodes of the season, and the second one is the lowest rated. So, but we should talk about, unless y'all have more to say about the grain of truth parts of this, we should talk about the other plot lines. There's not a lot because most of them are set up for the next episode, but we should talk about Frangilla, Yennefer, and Tissaia.
Yeah, the only other thought I really have is that it's nice to see Ciri in this perspective. Well, actually, sorry, there's 2 things I want to say in this perspective, because she kind of gets to be the voice of all the girls that have gone through in the book Nivellen's manner, and kind of we hear his perspective on their lives, and like it doesn't seem like it's a bad thing that they sleep together. It seems to be consensual, but we kind of get her point of view as like the unsuspecting girl who gets the bath and the dress and the food and all this like lavish attention. And the other thing I just want to mention is the line that Verina says about when she's talking to Ciri for the first time, and they're talking about Geralt, and she says he kills monsters or whatever, and Ciri says that monsters do bad things to humans, and Verina has a very good counter argument, which is that humans do bad things to everyone.
Yeah,
I can't argue with that.
Man, that's a good line. Yes. And especially if you consider what Ciri's doing by accident. It's not her fault, but like she unleashed all these monsters on the world by accident. Later, she's possessed. Like, like all these terrible things happen that out of her control.
But we also see in the final episode of the season, someone do some we hear a truth about someone and babies. Which
that's for sure.
But overall, you guys really enjoyed the Grain of Truth episode. I really did too. Like I really like a 4.5 out of 5 for me. It was really good.
Yeah, pretty much for me too. So yeah, Tissaia, Michal, would you how do you rate it, Michal, like against the other 7 episodes? Like near the top, in the middle, or
I don't usually like rating things, but it was, I think, a very, very strong start to the.
I don't like rating them either. That's why I'm like general rating, not like
we're not going to do any more ratings. We're just going to say it was awesome.
I mean, also like if things stick out as like especially good or especially bad, that'll come up, as I think we'll mention fairly soon
Yeah.
with other things. But you know.
So we have this Battle of Sodden, right? The afterwards,
Mhm.
which is nicely tied in because Ciri, that's what she's dreaming of when she's waking up and having those dreams of being taken by Kaer. So it's a nice like tie, you know, the plot lines are connected. And then of course they actually show up there at the battlefield. And that's the prologue of Battle of Elves, or Battle of Elves. Blood of Elves is the Ciri having the dream.
There's a battle of elves though, Aziz, so you're good.
There is also, you're right, yeah. And this reaction after meeting Tisea, again, another amazing like acting on his part, just his very like masculine nothing affects me facade is clearly
nostrils flaring.
is clearly breaking. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, Henry Cavill is very good at this, especially this role in particular. So I love that replay feature. How cool is that little replay feature that Tisea was using? As gory as it was, I was like, that's kind of a neat device to create. I don't think there's anything like that in the books. I thought that was pretty cool. Actually, maybe there is something like that in the books. But either way, it was cool.
I like how it was visualized because we do see Tisea do some torturing, and I was like, oh, how is this going to translate to the screen? But I felt it was effective because we kind of get a little bit of redemption from Kaer here in the middle of the season, but it was interesting to see how much pain he was in because she literally had her fingers in his brain. So it was like,
yeah, like that was neat. Like backing up just a little bit, like Vilgefortz tries to get her to stop searching for Yennefer, which at the time is just like, stop hurting yourself. You need to give it up or whatever. But later you're like, this guy's, he's got ulterior motives here. Now that's if you're a book reader.
I think something might be up with Vilgefortz.
Yeah, if you're a book reader, you already knew that. But yeah, like some people are like, what is this guy up to? I really appreciate the healing of Triss moment there, because I think that was a little nod to Triss's allergies. Triss has allergies to elixirs and a lot of stuff, which is raised in Blood of Elves when she goes to Kaer Morhen, and they're like, no, none of that, I'm allergic to it. And that's, remember she gets sick in the caravan, right? And that's I don't think that they're probably still going to have that caravan scene, by the way. It just appears to be set up for the beginning of season 3. It was early in Blood of Elves, but or not early, but like a third of the way through Blood of Elves. So that's probably still going to happen. It's just been moved.
Yay, we get to see Triss pooping her guts out.
Yeah, I'm not sure Triss will be there, but we'll probably have the caravan get ambushed. But if Triss is there, that would be fun, because the more Triss, the better. Yeah.
She just gets like the most human of all this. She has to be allergic. She has nobody can cure her burns, and she has a massive intestinal parasite that wreaks havoc on her system.
Yeah, totally true. So Kyle, yeah, you mentioned the torture. It's really interesting because Artorias, who has an interesting role this season, that's of course Fringilla's uncle, and he is more of about sticking to the rules, and so he's against this torture of Kaer because it's against the rules. But Vilgefortz, of course, is there to be like, oh, she wasn't asking your permission, because obviously Vilgefortz doesn't care about the damn rules. And there's such good camera work in that scene, the torture scene. There's this incredible shot where it's sideways and you can only see the stained glass window and the two figures with this light going through. Like they really went all out with like the
they did a vertical shot too, where it was like above, where you can see like from above, and she's like, you can see the power of Tisea like kind of like this, and it was like a vertical shot. So they got a bunch of different shots in there. That was cool.
And it's a really great theme work too. Michal, I'd love to hear your take on this, because I think it's you that wrote this here about, well, the thing that helps him get through this is his faith, right?
Yeah.
And that's such a huge part of the next episode with Fringilla and Francesca. Their faith is like the thing that's really sustaining them too. So that's really well like mirrored and all.
Yeah. So it's interesting because, if you know the books, Kaer is on a different path, I guess you could say. Yeah. And we've been talking
much
about
lower ranking too. He's
just what they're doing with him. And I think, whenever I see a character who's like bad, but I kind of want to like in prison, I'm like, yes, they get to break, they get to have their like darkest moment, and then they can like start coming out the other side. And at first I thought that was what was going to happen with Kaer, and just to peek a little bit into further episodes, it's not. And I think that really is because he has what is important to him still at this point in the season. Like he is still here. He is still possessed of his intense faith in the white flame. So whatever Tissaia does to him is gonna suck, but it's not going to actually break him.
Yeah.
I don't want to use another Game of Thrones reference here, but I liken Cahir a lot to Jaime Lannister and his like devotion to Cersei. That's kind of how I liken Cahir's devotion to the White Flame and faith of Nilfgaard, and his devotion to kind of pushing that agenda forward. They're not the same, obviously, because they're different characters, but it definitely reminds me a lot of that.
Yeah, there's some things they have in common for sure. I like that. I like that comparison. One other point, or at least one other point, there's some really, like, how good is the back and forth between Frigilla and Yennefer? They have such good dialogue. It's like A+ sniping just on both sides. They both have so many good lines. But there's also some, like, for example, they argue about, losing the battle, about fire magic, Emhyr's desires or what they might be. And there's this great exchange where Yennefer says, "You're eager to please, easy to wound." And she retorts, "You're blind, Yennefer," which made me laugh because in the book version, Yennefer is blinded in the Battle of Sodden by Fringilla. So it's like, aha, I see what you did there.
I'm sure they'll be most understanding. All leaders are.
Such a good line. Yeah, I'm sure they'll be most understanding.
And I love that, especially because I think like Fringilla's talking about the mages, but like we see so many more kings and queens in this season, which I really love. And I think that's just a great commentary on their perspective also. It's like, yeah, sure. Like that's, it's ironic given that Fringilla has devoted her life to a leader, but it's a great line.
One thing I like about their relationship in this adaptation on the show specifically is that we're going to get more screen time for characters like Cahir and Fringilla. And, Yennefer and Fringilla have a rich backstory together and a history together. And I think that this is something that's going to continue throughout the show without spoiling too much. And I really kind of love this back and forth element of it. Fringilla's actor really broke up for me this season. She was one of the MVPs for me. And like,
she was so good.
Yeah. Especially like all of her stuff to deal with the faith. And personally, obviously I love exploring the kingdom of Nilfgaard more and what faith really means to them. And obviously we're going to learn more about their leaders' ideals eventually in the future, but I just love because this is the beginning of that, and there's so much to explore, especially for Fringilla and her faith. It's like a big defining thing for her character, and it's like, oh, they gave us big chunks of that. It's like, damn, okay, this is a character I want to learn more about.
Should we finish off with some of the a few funny lines?
Yeah, and then we'll jump into episode 2.
Yeah. So one of these was in the trailer, and it's a pretty good line. "I've lived through a dark age and 3 supposed end of days. It's all BS. Maybe not this time, Geralt. Maybe not."
I saw someone make a meme of that was just like millennials.
Yeah,
it was meta. It's a meta thing, right? Like 22 Y2K 2012. Like there was a lot of meta moments this season.
It wasn't even that meta because they filmed this episode before COVID. So,
but it kind of is though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, in practice it was, but like they didn't write it being like, "Hey, doesn't everything suck?" Or maybe they did, and then just didn't realize how much it was about.
Yeah, he could have said, "I've lived through an injury and 3 supposed end of shootings."
But it is funny because Geralt is much older. Like we're not 95, and we've kind of lived through like 3 of those, I guess. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I left him. So I found that really funny. That was great.
The next one is a little comic relief when they're discussing their awful traumatic nightmares. Geralt says, "Except for the one about the rock troll, overly friendly, tough image to shake." Because he's talking about he makes it easier to forget your nightmares. He's like, well, not that one. That's really good.
And there's we actually talked about this. Probably we won't get into it with too much, but there's like a really like dumb rock troll in the Witcher 3 games, and it's kind of just funny. I don't know if it's a reference to that at all, but for Witcher 3 fans, especially Ryan, will like that.
So for those, I was so disappointed, by the way, because I brought this next joke I brought up to Kyle and Michal, but neither of them get it because neither of them watch What We Do in the Shadows. So I'm hoping some of you all will get this next one. Some of you guys watch What We Do in the Shadows. You know that what's his name? Matt Berry always yells bat when he wants to turn into a bat. And when Nivellen yells bath, it just made me think of that. So please indulge me on that joke. And now we can move on. There was something we talked about in the short story version of this, which was like there's some like cartoony moments on purpose, like when he says a pox on it, or when like he talks about how his eyes, like it's like they jump out of their face like a cartoon, like staring at something, you know what I mean, when their eyes just jump out of your face and things like that. There's a joke, there's a kind of a little bit of a reference to that in this one. He says ran away so fast his feet didn't touch the ground, which is like that's like Wile E. Coyote or rather the Roadrunner or whatever. You have these kind of things in cartoons where people run so quickly that their feet don't touch the ground. So I think that was what they were doing with that one.
I got that sound, that sound effect of that.
Where their feet turn into little wheels, you know, like cartoons where their feet move so fast.
Also, a big shout out to everyone in chat. We really, really appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. Let us know what you thought of the Grain of Truth episode. I see most of you have really enjoyed it, but thank you. You know, it's Saturday night. You could be chilling anywhere else, and you're chilling with us. We really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, y'all.
Also, some interesting thoughts about Kaer, and I don't want to give it away because there's like a lot to discuss there that isn't really relevant to this episode. But like, I have thoughts on the thoughts that you were expressing. Just want to say that.
He's
Cool.
a great character. You know, one thing I will say before we move into the next episode, we talked a little bit about this privately, the kind of POVs that we're getting. You know, obviously at the end of the season, we have a lot of characters coming together, but what I really love is that we're getting characters like Kaer and Yennefer together and other characters, and we're getting these different POVs from Nilfgaard and, you know, the Lodge and Kaer Morhen and Geralt and Ciri. So I really, you know, I hate comparing it to Game of Thrones, but they did such a strong job with that this season, and I felt it was, even though we just got a little smidgen of that in episode 1, it was strong because it was between two really great characters, Yennefer and Fringilla. And obviously at the end of the episode, they get captured, which leads us into the next episode.
Yeah, let's do it.
So yeah, the next episode is named Kaer Morhen, a very, very beloved location. I believe it's in Cadwyn, if I'm not mistaken. And this is where the home, he's got his map behind him.
Yeah, that's one of the small complaints I would have about the season is how quickly people seem to have gone back and forth from Kaer Morhen. But you know, whatever. You never know exactly how much time has passed. Sometimes it seems like it was just a minute, but actually they implied like a week or two has passed.
For the Continent Express.
Yeah, for example, at the end of this episode, there's definitely a time jump between episode 2 and episode 3 because clearly Ciri has been trained for a bit, you know. Getting ahead of ourselves.
Well, one thing I think that was really interesting about this is, you know, when the episode titles leaked before the season, this episode was titled Kaer Morhen. People were, I think this is one of the most highly anticipated episodes because this is the kind of beginning of, you know, we knew that Ciri was going to come train there, and you know, we knew that we were going to get Vesemir. We knew he was cast in the show and all of that. So really, really exciting. And then this episode doesn't disappoint either. There's some really, really, really great mythology elements. We're going to get into that, and characters that we get to meet that are going to be long-lasting characters throughout the series. And yeah, overall, just really enjoyed this episode. Now, obviously, there's some things we're going to talk about here. There's towards the end of kind of this episode 2 review, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about Lauren Hisrich and her comments and some of the character changes and stuff like that. But there are definitely some things I did not enjoy about changes, and I think a lot of the fandom feels that way too. But also, understandably, this is an adaptation. Nothing can be one-to-one, and I did understand why they made some of these changes. So I think that's kind of a little bit of context for what we're about to say here.
Yeah, I feel like this episode, it definitely got a lot of criticism from book readers and people who already know the story, and we're all going to criticize it, at least that part of it or some parts of it. I mean, the three of us, but having watched it multiple times, I definitely liked it a lot more the second time because I was no longer confused. I was no longer trying to my brain wasn't subconsciously trying to scramble and attach everything to what I already knew. I wasn't just sitting back and enjoying it for what it was and seeing how it connects. That said, I still have criticisms, but it was way better for me the second time. Like you said, Kyle, it's, other people have criticized it. It's the lowest rated episode on IMDb, but it's still 7.8, which is still pretty good. It's certainly not bad. There's a lot. I agree with you. There's a lot to like about this episode, even with those criticisms. And regarding adaptations, I will say this: look around at all of your favorite shows that were adaptations. How many of them actually hewed that close to the source material? Very few of them, probably. There's always exceptions, but most adaptations have to make significant changes. And I think a lot of times we fall into the trap of thinking they did that just to put their own stamp on it. They did that just because they didn't like the author's vision. That's true sometimes, but I think we should be very careful just jumping to that conclusion. But that doesn't mean they can't make mistakes when they make the right choice to change things, right? Like it can be both. It can be a smart change that wasn't executed that well. So that's my opening spiel. What about you, Michal?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had some problems with this episode in terms of like how effective what they were going for was. Still some very cool imagery and great to see, Ciri and Geralt at Kaer Morhen. The stuff with, Yennefer and Francesca and Fringilla, which, by the way, typing Francesca and Fringilla is going to be fun over and over again. I bet that was fun in the writers' room.
Say that 5 times fast, by the way.
That was very creepy. A very cool thematic, also kind of doesn't make that much sense. Or at least you have to think about it really hard. But like it, it's definitely atmospheric and very cool. And yeah, I mean, honestly, like I think it's painful when, a character like Gaskell isn't like a, massive character in the books, but like he's someone that like you can attach to a little bit. And as I understand, he's a much bigger character in the game. So it's painful when you're looking for, that character to be represented, or someone like that you really like to be represented on screen. And then, this happens. And I totally get that. And I wasn't that satisfied with it either. That said, like having, watched the entirety of the season, I think that what they were going for, was actually quite effective and was very powerful.
Like the structure of the season, you're saying?
Yeah, and just in what it does to certain characters, like, yeah.
That's part of why rewatching made a big difference for me, because then I was like, oh, this is what this is leading to. Once I saw their picture, saw their vision for it, and see how it tied into the book elements that were changed, just different, the same things, but done differently. Like the fact that Deathless Mother basically is connected to the Wild Hunt, well, that makes it all make a lot more sense, right? Like the Wild Hunt's after Ciri. So yeah, there you go. Like she's part of that. Okay. And then this whole thing about not being safe at home, that was a theme that they really wanted to push. That's less a part of the books, but it makes sense to have that. I like that. I like the way they evolved Geralt's thinking on how to handle Ciri. Is first he starts with like, I just need to protect her. And then by the end of this episode, he's like, nope, we're not even safe at home. We're not even safe at home in the winter when no one knows where we are. So yeah, this is good. We're going to do this a little differently. So,
and it's happened before.
Yeah.
And they've been hunted before at Kaer Morhen, like we saw with the Nightmare of the Wolf stuff. We'll talk about that because there's a lot of great Nightmare of the Wolf references. Let's actually jump to the start of the episode, because you talked about the kind of imagery that we see in this episode, and we start off with a dream sequence here from Yen, and there's really, really interesting imagery here. Things are not quite what they seem, but the stuff that we see in there, kind of Yennefer's dream of having a child. We know she can't have that. We've obviously had Geralt, say some pretty harsh things about that. We wouldn't be good parents, all of these kind of references about it so far into their relationship. And then we kind of see some more disastrous elements, some more kind of prophetic things maybe that lead to some future elements of the story. So it's a pretty interesting dream sequence, don't you think?
I laughed so hard, and I can't wait to grow old together. It's like, oh man, this is so clearly a dream.
Which kind of old? I mean, like,
yeah, what kind of old?
They're both really old already. Which
Deathless Mother old, or wait?
they're both already like 100, so that's why it's even more funny.
Yeah. I like too how like young / alternate Geralt is just ponytail Geralt. They just tie his hair back. Because in this episode also they have flashback with Eskel, and it's the same. It's like, oh, so that's how you just denote that. The other way is to take off the blue filter. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I have a blue light because I was paying homage to the blue filter that's in almost every scene of The Witcher, but they take it off for dreams. So that kind of helps you tell right away that it's a dream because there's no blue filter. Like, hey, where's the blue? Oh, this is a dream. No wonder. So that's a little clue for y'all to keep an eye out for. If the blue filter's gone, something's different about the reality of the scene.
And then we have a baby bursting into flames, which happens to someone later on in the season. So quite ominous.
Yeah, Michal, you had an interesting take on that we talked about offline. Do you think that was just like one of the only ways they could show the child dying, or is that supposed to tie into Francesca's baby murdering at the end of the season, like mass killing? Is like, whoa, that's hardcore. Jeez.
Well, I think we might see a rune. I did watch it again, but I don't remember. Do we see a rune on Yennefer's baby?
We never see the baby. I don't think we ever see it. We only see like the bundle and then in the crib, because all you see is flames emanate from the crib.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think we're supposed to at least thematically connect it. Like this is gonna be horrible, but like we don't see smoke or anything in the town, so but I wouldn't totally discount it, I guess I would say. I think what you can fairly assume is that there is, at least for the babies, some kind of internal heat pain going on, because it's like the color of the rune is like reddish orange, and they're crying a lot, and it's
we also know that fire magic is linked to chaos as well now. This is kind of something like, like fire magic. We learn more in the next few couple of episodes too, without spoiling too much. Rience, him, and he's someone that's
very good point.
Definitely not lawful good. But I think that's definitely more showcased more in the books, right? Aziz, like that is something that fire magic is kind of like this forbidden thing that
I think it's pretty well done in the show, pretty well explained in the show. Like basically, like Yennefer has that confrontation with the Deathless Mother, the little girl, who did a great job, by the way. I tried to find that actress, but I think this is her first role ever, so she doesn't have like a big online presence. But she's like, burned yourself out at Sodden, did you? Like fire magic's dangerous, so yeah, it was pretty explicit, I think. But yeah, and of course we know that's going to be important later for other characters. And that's so she says, give her to me, she's ours. Like, whoa. That's like, yikes.
So another thing that's interesting about this scene, I think, is that Francesca and Fringilla are both having their corresponding dreams of the hooded figure at the same time, and they're both seeing what they want, right? Francesca is seeing, a horrible maze full of elven bodies, and then she comes out and dawn is rising on a new elven kingdom, and Fringilla is like remembering being rescued or being imprisoned and then being rescued by Emir. So I think it's really interesting that what the Deathless Mother offers Yennefer first is what she wanted all of season 1, right? Like, she wouldn't shut up about having a kid. It was all she wanted. And that's what she offers her here. And it's like her easy, gambit way into, getting Yennefer to do what she wants. And it doesn't work. So it's really, amazing when they get to, the actual scene, and both Fringilla and Francesca are still kind of on those tracks. I mean, suspicious to various levels, but still, consistently with that, and it doesn't at all work. Like, the Deathless Mother has to completely change tack with Yennefer, and I have a theory about that, but we'll get to that.
You know what I really love about this is like the idea of desires is not exactly your destiny, and Fringilla kind of has an epiphany about it. She's like, well, I'm staying faithful, like, you know what I mean, like, this is my path. And Yennefer is a little bit less optimistic, I think, you know what I mean, because of her life experiences, clearly. But I think that's kind of the interesting thing, this Deathless Mother offers, like, shows them we see their desires and not necessarily their destiny. So it's like, I really love that about the kind of whole vision.
Yeah, it's like a classic deal with the devil sort of thing.
It is, yeah,
like pretty straightforward almost when you put it, when you spell it out like that. From the chat here, Amanda Molyneux suggests maybe that's supposed to be Ciri. the child, since if Yennefer
Yeah.
adopts Ciri, that might be because who else? I mean, give her to me, she's ours. They do want Ciri. They don't care about Yennefer's non-existent baby that she can't have. So they do want Ciri. So that fits extremely well. That's probably.
And we know that
right.
Geralt, Ciri, and Yennefer's destinies are all linked together. And the kind of irony of Geralt saying, "Oh, we never be good parents," and then we see the situation that they're in later on is, it's kind of ironic. Like, oh, okay, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's their baby. That's Ciri is technically their kid. And if Geralt and Yennefer stay together, without spoiling too much, we don't know that yet.
Yeah. So the other really, that's well said. The other important element of this deal here is that all three of them are desperate, right? Like Fringilla is desperate. She's failed. She's worried about being executed or whatever. And obviously Francesca's desperation is rooted in the outcome of her entire species. So she's got a huge burden to bear. And Yennefer, it's different. No one's really depending on her. She's not like gonna die because of someone else is going to kill her. Not a specific person. She's obviously without her power. She's at a lot of risk, but it's not one person putting her at risk. It's not like one agency is going to come for her. So she has a little more perspective. I think maybe she just has more perspective anyway. She's not a person who is guided by faith nearly as much as these other two characters, but that's a really huge element here because that explains why they go for it later. That's why Fringilla realizes that's not M here, and Francesca openly says, "You're not Ithlin, are you?" But still goes along with it because they're
both
getting what
think
they
that
want.
they can outsmart this deal, which is typical of a deal with the devil, right? You think you've got all the cards, really. Sure, right? Wink,
Sure.
wink. But yeah, another thing I find so interesting about this is that like both Francesca and Fringilla, like the mother basically demands that they ask of her. They ask something of her, and they each ask for what they want. And so she's like, "Okay, I'll give it to you." And Yennefer refuses to ask for anything. So this is kind of the root of my theory that Yennefer actually, doesn't lose her magic at Sodden. I don't know that the show really supports this, but I don't think she loses her magic at Sodden. We don't see her having the opportunity to use magic. She's in Demerthian chains, like through all of episodes 1 and 2. She makes one comment about how she's like feeling off because of the Demerthium. But then the person who tells her that she no longer has her magic because of Sodden is the Deathless Mother. And she's taunting her with this reality. Whereas what I think happened is that the Deathless Mother was like, "Fine, you're not going to ask me. I'm going to take from you. And then eventually I'll get what I want from you."
You're going to have to ask for it back. Yeah,
exactly.
Because Yennefer wished that her essentially family didn't want to die at the Battle of Sodden, to kind of clarify things. I mean, Nilfgaard would have probably defeated him if it wasn't for Yennefer. Let's be honest here. And it's pretty interesting, though. I mean, you ask for something from the devil, there's going to be consequences.
What is it?
Which was what we see.
What is her line? She says, wait, where is the line? Go ahead, Michal. You've got to take off.
It's funny because I ended up really liking Francesca later in the season, and I really dislike her in this episode because she's so like stubborn and just
zealous.
Yeah. Without like what to back it up with, and like I it's just so I don't like characters who are like, "Yes, let's go down into this tunnel surrounded by ceremonial corpses and recite this rhyme. This will be fine."
You
it's
really
fine.
don't see the danger here.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I feel bad for like Francesca and for Fringilla and Yennefer, because they're both kind of like, I'm not sure about this. And like, so I feel really bad for Yennefer specifically because she's the one who was like, "This is a really bad idea and I'm not going along with it."
Yeah.
By the way, chat, how many of you would open a tomb with a skeleton with 3 skulls on it? Just
that thing was creepy as heck.
Oh my god!
I definitely
have the ones kneeling by the side. It's so scary.
And you know what? In the news, this is unrelated, but people of Earth, archaeologists, stop opening sarcophagi. Okay, I'm tired of this. I don't want Deathless Mother to be released on Earth, man. Okay,
that's what we offer to them. We say, "Look, we know we've seen a lot of movies. We know don't open the tombs." Like,
especially it just opens in front of you. Like, what, guys? Come on.
And it's like immediately, as soon as they open the tomb, the stairs open, you hear the whisper. This is hard to catch, by the way, because if you don't have subtitles on, you probably didn't see this, because there's a whisper that says, "Take back your forests." She's telling Francesca exactly what she wants to hear. It's like, oh yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to take back our forests. Let's go in here. They're telling us what we want. But Yennefer later, I found the line I was looking for. Yennefer says, "You know she's no god." She's like, "You guys are being so dumb." Flat out calls it.
It's so interesting that Yennefer is just not. She's not that susceptible to desperation in that way. Like, I think she is so used to losing things that she is, and I mean, something I think we can discuss how effective overall the Deathless Mother plot is, but Yennefer's refusal to give in and the length of time that it takes her to finally give in to that, and how stubborn she is and holding out, is like really impressive to me.
I think also, though, like, I agree with that, but also if you look at like Fringilla, Yennefer kind of stepped in and took her job, and then Francesca and the elves, like, they haven't had a smidgen of what they want. They've had crumbs. So I think their situations are more desperate, like we've been saying.
No, it's true. It's true. That's, yeah, I guess it's kind of like a very Yennefer coming from being, a disabled person and living like such a horrible life, I guess, is what I'm really focusing on. I mean,
she's maybe experienced more pleasure and happiness than the other two, perhaps.
And but it's also just been very well established that she's very resistant to organization, and she's not a joiner. She does have to join.
She doesn't conform,
but
sure.
She's a super aggressive nonconformist. You're right. She will
she's
not
a ball of
accept
spikes.
Yeah, she recognizes a deal's being forced on her, and she's smart enough to realize that can't be good for her. She's no way she's going to benefit significantly from a deal that an evil ancient creature is forcing on her. And then when she
literally calls it an evil witch. She's like, I'm not taking a deal from that evil witch, bitch.
Yeah, that evil witch is no old god. She's extremely explicit about it. And then, but she's also like running through the forest, like trying to cast spells and crying because she can't. And this just goes to show how powerful the magic of the Deathless Mother is. She sees into her memories, because of course she can get into dreams, so that kind of fits with that. And it's pretty hardcore. She brings back Yennefer's memories of suicide. She's like, "Oh, you're not desperate? I'll show you desperate." Show you as desperate as you've ever been. And there's a really amazing line, really dark line. She says, "I want your desperation crisp." And that's when it cuts to her bleeding from the wrists, and then she wakes up and she looks at her wrists like, what's going on? And then she tries to use magic, and
by the way,
but she's still like, no. Even throughout that, she's like, no.
We do see some foreshadowing there to the final episode where Yennefer offers sacrifice herself. We won't talk about that too much, but that was a little bit of a glimpse of the future too.
Yeah, well,
so there was a mix.
It's funny, you can't it's almost like the Deathless Mother in her desperation sort of gave Yennefer the answer. I don't understand how it worked, to be honest. That's all a little fuzzy to me, a lot fuzzy, to be honest. But like, I think she did slip there.
I felt like she did offer that a little bit to each of them too. Like, you know what I mean? She like played with their desires, but also offered a kind of glimpse of their future,
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I guess I think maybe the Deathless Mother recognizes her resistance and thinks, oh, I can break you. Just like, which kind of an interesting inversion. She doesn't have faith, yet she's not broken because of it, which is the opposite of what happened in episode 1, where Kaer's faith is what kept him from being broken. So that's a kind of a neat inversion. And then another really good line here is when they're trying to get at Filavandrel. We haven't even mentioned him yet. Filavandrel comes out, and he's like, he has that awesome scene where he sits down with them, with Francesca and Francesca's brother. I don't know if that was clear, but that other,
I did not think he was a good actor, Francesca's brother.
Yeah, that Brad Pitt looking dude is Francesca's brother. So he says, they're talking about how faith can lead us, and how she was elected because of that. Like, he was their like logical, hardcore, like straightforward leader, but now they're desperate, so they need faith. And there's this great line: faith's a simple medicine for desperate souls. Because Yennefer's like, talking to Phil Evangel. So she's going with that angle, like, yeah, y'all maybe, you know, trying to get in good with him by agreeing with his unspoken position. But Fringilla doesn't get it, and she's of course faithful. She's like, faith sustains us all in dark times. And that was so powerful when he doesn't drink the fake hunger sustenance, right? Like he's like, this will keep you going. And he's like, nah, I'm not drinking that. He doesn't want to lie to himself. He doesn't want to, it's really symbolic and powerful. Like he refuses to take that, to fool himself. I think it's like they're drinking because it's like drinking the Kool-Aid, right?
There's a really awesome note here was that you were Aziz, Ithleen, Violet, and Amir are all presented to each of them.
Yeah.
Is that you meet Aziz? Or
I wrote that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They're presented like in their different colored robes, and that's part of how they are able to realize they're dreaming of the same thing. You know, that enables them to have this connection, I think, to realize they're all dreaming about the same thing. If they didn't have that, they may not have worked together, you know, they shouldn't have worked together on this. They should have just run away. But given that they were drawn in there together, that was part of her plan, and is what I'm getting at, I suppose. How about those amazing runes and the mosaics when they're walking through there, all the conjunction stuff. I got a couple of those in this season, didn't we?
We saw that. We first kind of talked a little bit about that when I caught it when we had Pavetta and Dooney being married in the banquets episode, when, you know, Pavetta's getting sick and she's literally pregnant with Ciri. She barfs on the conjunction, and that's kind of funny because Ciri is opening up conjunctions, and, you know, Pavetta opened up the world to Ciri, so that's pretty interesting. And I found that that's interesting there too, because, you know, the Deathless Mother being this kind of, I guess we'll use otherworldly power again, because the conjunction connects with otherworlds. I feel like that's a safe word to use.
And that is, and that's why I appreciate them doing that, because in the books, there's not that much on the conjunction spheres. It's like this thing that happened and you just kind of forget about it. But the magic that gets used towards the end of the series by various people and powers and stuff is very related to that. So it makes sense to tie it all together and show that this is the magic they're kind of after. They're after this particular power for their own, you know, goals, their own evil goals. But, you know, that we'll get into that later. But yeah, but it's I think it's
they nailed that this season. They nailed that this season. That was like, we all agreed on that. that was a great part of this season. I cannot speak any more on it right now. Otherwise, we will have a whole episode of Kyle talking about mythology.
Well, there's a clever way that they work the mythology in here too. There's this line where her brother, Francisca's brother's like, we burned a lot of our own temples rather than letting them fall into your hands, the human hands, which is kind of like sour grapes. It kind of sounds like that, but on reflection, I'm thinking it's not all that. It's not just sour grapes. It's definitely part sour grapes, but part of it is, look what happens when humans get elven magic. And they're like, it doesn't.
Well, we can't forget history, right? I mean, elves took humans in, they taught them magic, and then elves, dwarves, and all sorts of other creatures were literally pushed to the brink of extinction.
Exactly my point. Yes.
So and Michal always has, you know, such a strong voice in mentioning that humans can be the biggest monsters. It's one of the biggest themes of the series, especially with Mr. Amir being introduced and Mr. Vilgefortz.
Yeah. So clearly there's this interesting, or not clearly, but there's this interesting line. Tissaia said elven mages were dead. She was wrong, or she lied. Neither is a surprise. So that's like a sign that Yen's a little down on Tissaia. But we'll have to see. That didn't have resolution so much this season, but it's certainly something that's ongoing. I don't know. Did you guys have a reaction to that one?
She's an authority figure. Yennefer's not going to be nice about her, like, no matter how she really feels.
Good point. Keep it simple. There is that whole authority thing.
Yennefer does not like to be bossed around, and that's why I like her.
Yeah, I like the shade thrown at Jaskier. You know, we obviously don't meet him yet, but when they're like, I hear you used to be the king of the elves and blah blah blah, and Phil Evangel's like the lying bard and his tunes. Phil Evangel's bitterness really comes out.
You know, that's part of what I really loved about the episode too. The elven stuff was so strong this season, and we're going to continue to talk about that in our other episodes. But you know, we kind of previewed that, you know, through talking through, you know, our podcast episodes just on the books, and now we're getting some of that. Obviously, you know, Blood of Elves, and going forward, we know that there's going to be bigger conflict because what happens at the end of the season. But I just love it so much because, you know, we didn't get very much of that. I felt like one of the short stories that wasn't adapted so well was obviously the Edge of the World stuff, and it's okay because we can't have everything be perfect. You know what I mean? But we did get that kind of sense of, oh, you know, things are not all right in the elven world, and I can definitely see why he picked Francesca, because she's definitely decisive. That's for sure. But a good thing she has Philavandrel there to kind of balance her out in a more kind of, we get kind of Philavandrel's chill vibes. Aziz, you're the one who kind of really mentioned this to me, like in the Nightmare of the Wolf. I like, you know, how chill he is with Vesemir. So it's cool. It's cool to kind of see that vibe kind of imbalancing out Francesca's more fiery.
Yeah, they really fiery. Good. Well said. I see what you did there. Yeah, Philavandrel's character is pretty consistent throughout all his many appearances. Like, it's funny that he's now captured Yennefer, Frigilla, Geralt, and Jaskier. He just has to capture Ciri, the one they want most of all. He hasn't captured, but he's very loyal to his people. He's like, he totally does not agree with Francesca's path, but he's like, but there's no question
she's
I'm
the
following
best choice.
it.
Yeah,
because I'm an elf and I'm like, my people depend on me. So that was present very strongly in Nightmare of the Wolf, present very strongly in season 1, even though he doesn't have a big role, and it's present very strongly here. So good character consistency and work. I like that.
The theme of faith was huge this season for sure.
Yeah, he has this other great line besides the lying bard line. He says when they're talking about, look, Fringilla says, look, we could be allies. The White Flame wants to punish the people who are oppressing your people. And he's like, thieving from a thief only makes you the latest thief. Or does he plan to give Cintra back after he's done dancing on Calanthe's grave? Hopefully y'all caught that little in-joke there. The White Flame dancing on Calanthe's grave. Yes.
I hope at some point they give us the full title, because it's going to take like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I don't want someone, you know, and actually that'll be too spoilery, but it is very Daenerys-esque.
That's a good time for a Game of Thrones comparison. Yeah, who has a longer title? We'll have to lay them all out and see in a future episode.
Yeah. Amir definitely has a bigger ego, though. We'll just say, never mind. Let's not get into that.
So 2 other really good lines I thought that are worth mentioning. About human prejudice and human centrism that the elves are really bitter about. One line is talking about this conjunction of the spheres. The heavens roared and the realms collided. Its survivors lost and forsaken in a new world. And then the brothers like, new to you, it was ours.
He's like, bitch, you stole it from us.
Yeah. And then Francesca says, wouldn't be the first time humans cried witch at the sign of elven power. Actually, I think that might have been the brother too. But it's the same point. Like, yeah, you're right. Like when a human does magic, it's like, okay. But when an elf does it, it's like, witch, you know. So that's an important part of The Witcher is the prejudice that is huge and important and ongoing. And both double-edged, let's be clear. Go ahead. There you go.
That was almost like we had like a stream on in the background. We talked at the same time and we were hearing an echo. Really Michal, lead us. Okay, never mind. Guys,
should we go to Kaer Morhen?
Yes.
I guess we probably should. Yeah. Well, one other thing too, about referring to your thing about her power. That line is, you know, about Yennefer using her power. There's this line, you felt it since Sodden, or rather haven't felt it, but you'd rather be blind than see the truth. So she's trying to give her the same level of denial, which you, as you said, Michal, may have been dishonest. She may be the reason for that. Yeah. So maybe we'll find out later.
I mean, I really like that for a lot of reasons, but also I like the idea that Yennefer did this really good thing and actually did release some of her chaos and bad feelings and kind of embraced her the fullness of her power, and like it didn't mess her up. And it's actually, you know, I I would prefer it to be a trick, but I don't know.
Yep,
I feel like I'm the only one with this theory. So.
Well, now you've spread it. We'll see if other people agree or disagree, and maybe we'll circle back on the feedback, because obviously we have. It'll be an ongoing thing. We're not done with that plot.
So yeah, arriving at Kaer Morhen.
Yeah, let's go there.
It was pretty epic. I love, obviously, you know, as a player of the game, I have certain imagery of Kaer Morhen, and reading the books, you obviously have certain imagery in what your mind you might think it looked like. But I thought it was pretty awesome looking, just as far as Kaer Morhen's look and the kind of vibes of it. And you know, we got to see a little bit of that in Nightmare of the Wolf, and I thought that was pretty similar. You know, we got the tree in the middle and got all of that. But what were your first impressions of Kaer Morhen and kind of the entrance scene? You know, we get kind of all the bros getting there together and Ciri trailing, and there's just this sort of kind of energy about it that was really epic, and it was like, we're at home. I don't know, I just loved it.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Michal, let's hear from you first.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. Some of, you know, the great stuff in the books is you know, the camaraderie and the, you know, multiple Ciri dad / big brother, you know, raising her, like that part of the story is really wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I didn't like super fangirl about it, but I thought it was a nice way to enter.
Ryan says, back to daddy daycare.
Daddy daycare. Nice. Oh, look at Mora. Just unstoppable generosity over here.
Oh
I don't have my
gosh,
soundboard and stuff
wow.
set up yet because I'm still waiting for my PC and all that. That'll be set up soon. But if I had the soundboard, I'd play clapping sound right now. Mora, thank you so much. We
Kaer Mora.
Kaer Mora. We care about Mora as well. That kind of makes sense that we say that.
Yeah, so it's really neat to me, the inversion of what's going on in this early part of this moment, or this scene, the stuff at Kaer Morhen, which is that you have winter is usually a time of like of things kind of resetting. You know, one good thing is there's no war in winter. That's an important thing, because you just can't move armies around very effectively. But these witchers are all, for the same reason. These witchers are all out fighting, not in wars, but they're out fighting monsters during winter. Here, this is their one time when they're pretty safe. Of course, that's exactly the feeling that they gets completely broken by events that come after this. But there's this great line from Vesemir where he says, each of your faces is cause for celebration. And I didn't fully grasp that at first. Like, of course, he's glad to see them because he knows them and he's fond of them and he's sort of a father to them. But just really take a minute to think about the anxiety that a lot of them are facing. Like, who's gonna come back this year? Like, who did we lose this year? Like, is Eskel gonna show up? Is Geralt gonna show up? Is that it for him? Did something finally get him?
Last I checked, there were 20.
Yeah, and that's one of the first things that you hear is that line. She asks, like, how many are there? And he's like, probably less now, and way less after this season.
Oh my ouch. Was it like 7, 5?
Yeah, pretty much most of the ones that we hadn't heard of from the books, almost all of them get killed.
Yeah, that was kind of annoying. Yeah. It was like, oh, I love seeing so many witchers. Oh, they're all red shirts.
Okay. Yeah, they're all red shirts.
Cohen, Lambert, at least, I guess.
Yeah.
Cohen.
So one of the things that didn't work for Eskel that could have worked better, I'm not saying that would have fixed it, but the stuff that comes after this episode is them lamenting his loss and having memories of him and showing why they liked him. That should have probably been done first, because people didn't know that in the moment of tension, how painful it was for Geralt and Vesemir. You could assume some things like he's their friend, they know him, but he kind of comes off as a jerk when he first arrives. So it's not as painful of a loss, and you don't feel the character's pain because you don't realize how close he is to them until after. And even then, it's arguably not done enough, but it is done. Like Vesemir and like Eskel is, like, Geralt's pretty down about it, but you obviously don't see that right away. So that was one of the things that would have helped if they had set that up a little better.
Yeah, I think that was a main issue for me, you know, in that, like, he just kind of comes in and starts acting like an asshole, and I'm like, well, so my impression is he's an asshole. The end.
Yeah.
And then, like
He
on
puts them
top
all
of
in danger with the bringing the sex workers there. Like that was just said. Like, yeah, in the beginning, Geralt's like, we don't tell anyone where it is because that's how we like it. We don't want people to know where it is. Last time people knew where we were, they all came and killed us. So
Mhm.
I see, I
And then
see what you're
Elsko's like,
yeah.
hey, here we are. Come on in this way.
yeah,
I
like,
see what I see what yeah, I see what you're saying, Michal, because like without spoiling too much at the start of the third episode, you get this really sweet, tender moment of Geralt and Eskel, and you're like, oh, why couldn't there have been a little bit of that first and then been like, oh, okay, like he started to get really infected and stuff. If like even if they had like 15 seconds of that or like 20 seconds of that, that would have made a huge difference, I think.
yeah.
I kind of wish that they hadn't killed Eskel in this episode and had him as the Leshy, and then like had them all going through like the, you have this on medical shows, like if a member of the hospital team is like badly injured, they're all like remembering how important that person was to them and like how great they are, and like so seeing like this monstrous version of Eskel compared to the memories that they have of him and trying to really save him and then maybe not being able to, I think would have accomplished the same thing with, emphasizing the danger that can exist in Kaer Morhen without like, while also giving us more of an investment in the character.
And then that would have been crazy too if Eskel was the one calling to Ciri and knowing that there's kind of this like intruder, you know what I mean? Like, you're safe nowhere, you know what I mean? Like, holy shit, you can, these monsters can take over the ones you love. Like, I mean, we obviously know that Geralt bolts later on, like that's the thing. He's like, well, we're not safe here, but that's a pretty interesting take, I think.
So here's where, even though we're criticizing this plot line, here's where I want to give Lauren Histrick a lot of credit, because as you mentioned at the beginning of this episode, Kyle, she went on Twitter to talk about this plot line specifically, and she accepted the criticism openly and made suggestions kind of along the lines of some of the things we have said about how it could have worked better, which is very different than, say, I don't know, Ridley Scott being like, these kids today they're ruined by Marvel movies, so they don't want to see a good
fucking movie theater.
Like, come on, man, like own some of the issue. Like, it's just don't push it all on other people. Like, there are other problems. I haven't even seen that movie, but like, come on, it was COVID's the main problem here, dude. I mean, come on, like, be real. So,
and his attitude.
Yeah, there's just his attitude sucks. Whereas Lauren Histrick's attitude is great. She's like, I'm a fan too. I want to get this right. If you guys tell me I'm wrong and enough people tell me that, I'm going to listen. And I do really appreciate that. That gives me a lot of confidence for the next 5 seasons, assuming they get to do all those, which really looks like they will, given how successful this all is. Because that's another thing we have to. One last tail end of my statement. As much as we book readers have some issues with some of this stuff, y'all got to keep in mind how much non-book readers love this season. As much as they did the first season.
And they're 90% of the watchers of the show.
Yeah, so we got to keep that in mind. Like, we know, all of us group, we pay more attention, we care more, but we are not the ones that made this exist. Like, Netflix has to have that volume of watchers. It doesn't have to have this big a volume, but if it didn't, it also would have a smaller budget and not as cool actors and all that. So we gotta put a little perspective on this.
Michal, without spoiling too much of our episode 3 and 4 reviews, there's some really great tonal elements and imagery we get, with Vesemir and Geralt in a cave later on and stuff like that. There's like some really, really great sentimentality that I think that kind of spans from this, and we get some great character growth for other characters like Vesemir and stuff. And of course, we talked about this. I was like, no, but there's also some things that are really positive that happen from this too.
It's also like I have real major issues with some of the stuff like that. Even just logically, I just don't get how a Leshy transformation could happen in a castle full of witchers who know somebody is acting weird and whatever. But it's very hard. Like, A, making TV is very hard. B, making TV that has been from the beginning affected by like, I don't know if this is true, but like in my head, The Witcher is like the ongoing project of COVID because they had to shut down all these times and like
we had 2 years for this, right?
Beginning, Christopher Hughes, you got COVID on the set of The Witcher. Like it's a very difficult thing. And didn't they even have to recast Eskel? Like, so I mean, like, I wonder if there's some if the plot was not quite this and stuff changed. So like I actually don't think creators are like obligated to respond to fans ever.
No,
But like
I agree with
I
you.
really appreciate that, Lauren did that, and like it certainly didn't ruin the season for me. It's just like I didn't like this part, and okay, we can move on.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, we don't have to like linger. Yeah, we said our piece. We criticized it. I think we treated it fairly, and yeah, but we would rather focus on the stuff we liked more.
We'll highlight one more comment. I've definitely noticed a lot of anger from video game fans. We got to remember that The Witcher 3 is not canon for book stuff, but I do agree because the story goes on and Eskel has a huge role to play in The Witcher 3 games. So
that's why there's so much anger. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and he has a huge story, like him and specifically Lambert. So without kind of spoiling too much, Eskel, doesn't get that much story in the books. But with that said, things could have been executed differently, definitely for sure.
Yeah.
But let's jump back into the analysis.
So like
a lot of great conversations happen. Sorry, go ahead, Aziz.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to build on what Michal was saying about how they didn't detect him until, I guess that was part of the way they rushed it, so because it happened so quickly. But on the other hand, when they did show it, it was like all the medallions on the tree were so jiggling. Cool. That was cool. So at least they saved it for something cool like that, like a big all at once moment. Yeah, that was awesome. That was really cool. And then they have, later, then they go and put his medallion on the tree too, which was, a way to sort of bookend that. But the other idea being, the other thing I wanted to point out really quick, just as a visual detail, I thought was really cool. I didn't notice it nearly as much the first time, but again, watching it again, you try to focus more on details. The eyes, like Geralt has the most outstanding eyes. They're bright yellow or whatever. Some of the Witchers don't really have different eyes, and some of them it's hard to tell. Like Vesemir is a pretty normal looking. Cohen had two different colored eyes. He had like heterochromia, which looked cool. And then Eskel's eyes, I don't know if y'all noticed, but it's the best time to notice is in the flashback. So in the beginning of episode 3, they're like this really neat, like blue, then red, then blue, like at the same time. It's super cool. I don't know what the hell they did there, but like, good job, production team.
So let's talk about some of the best elements of Kaer Morhen. Personally, some of my favorite. I mean, I think my favorite scene of the whole episode is when Vesemir is taking Ciri for a tour.
Same. I love that. Can't help myself. That lore is so cool.
Well, that scene is so crazy because it's literally the answer to Yennefer's plotline. Like they go down into the Deathless Mother thing and they're like, what is this? And then Vesemir's like, okay, so here's the dagger from this woods witch who we trapped in a cabin, and she really liked this dagger, and she's bad, so we shouldn't let her out again ever. And I'm like, okay, on rewatch, that's literally like, I love that.
And then we have that element. Then we also have Vesemir showing Ciri to Declan, and we saw the Nightmare of the Wolf. Declan was obviously one of the Witchers that was killed, and he was the one helping them create monsters, these mutations, so they can continue to fund Kaer Morhen, essentially. So that was I love that element, and Vesemir, and then Ciri says, "Oh, Declan was a father to you," and he's like, sort of, kind of. You know what I mean?
Like that. Yeah, he said something like that. Yeah. For lack of he didn't exactly have another father. It was the closest thing he had to one. Anyway.
But he has this facial twitch where you can tell it kind of hurts him a little bit. You know what I mean? And Witchers are not supposed to show a lot of emotion. And there's a small little facial twitch he has. And I'm like, oh man, it's such a small thing. It only happens for a second. But like, Witchers are supposed to be emotionless. And Vesemir, you can tell, like, even though Vesemir is super old, that's something that has definitely scarred him. You know what I mean?
He's the oldest one there, or the oldest one left. And he feels so that kind of elects him or nominates him as the keeper of a lot of this stuff, and the one who's like, he has to pass down this oral history or no one will know it. When I first saw the scene, I thought we were getting Witcher blood origin stuff, but I don't think that anymore, having watched it again, because that's the first elven Witcher. This is the first human Witcher, and he says this was Cliff was the name of the guy they were talking about that died in the process of imprisoning Deathless Mother the first time. The quote is, "One of the oldest monsters, a demon, long extinct. She wreaked havoc until the Witchers bound her deep into the forest." Of course,
I think no one's gonna let her out.
Yeah. And So Vesemir's not quite right about her being extinct. Bound her, he even says it almost like kind of contradicts himself. He's like extinct, but bound her deep in the forest, so she's not actually dead. And that is the dagger that Ciri, unless I remember wrong, that's the dagger that Ciri takes.
Same one.
Yeah, she goes like right for it.
Yeah, because when she's possessed. So yeah.
One thing on the blood origin thing, just to kind of clarify, I think a lot of people are gonna be confused. It's about the first Witcher. It's about the origins of elder blood and elven blood and the first Witcher. So there is, if you look at the trailer again, a lot of elves.
Yeah, it's because the first human Witcher was only like 300 years ago, and this is like 1,200 years or 1,300.
But the school of Witchering has a much there's a longer history as opposed to just the human Witchering.
Because they're just like because obviously the need was there, the need to kill monsters that were plaguing villages, and so that's been around since before humans were there, although not as much, or sort of came around the same time, because a lot of the monsters weren't there until the conjunction of the spheres, but it took a while for human civilization to get going, but the monsters were there right away, and the monsters were really bad right away, because as Geralt says about the Leshy, he's like, they can't reproduce. So they're pretty rare, because the only ones you see are ones that have been around since the conjunction, which is again 1,300 years ago. So that's that's no wonder there aren't many Leshies left. So
and they're they're super dangerous. So it's cool that we got to see a little bit of that.
Yeah. There's this line from Vesemir that also yet another Nightmare of the Wolf reference. He says, "Remember the last time Witchers put their noses in the drama of kingdoms?" He's right to point that out. On the other hand, the drama's coming for them. They can't hide from it. That's an important message, or kind of, you could almost call it a conclusion of this episode, especially Geralt and Vesemir seem to realize that. Maybe Vesemir realizes it later, but maybe not. I'm not clear on that, but Geralt realizes it right away. Obviously, that's how the episode ends. He's like, starts training her in swordplay, right? Immediately. He's like, all right, here's the steps. He doesn't say, follow me, but she knows. He's like, oh, we're doing this now. Cool. All right, I'm ready. Yeah, give me that sword. All right, yeah, let's train. Here we go.
Also, it's a little bit of an oversimplification of what happened when, like, remember how you were sort of making monsters, like, small detail there, I mean, not that it was justified, but there's more than one thing happening in that situation.
Yeah.
You know what I also love about men right in the men killed right in these halls is a little bit of foreshadowing for people being killed in the halls later on. And I mean, obviously the dagger is a lot of foreshadowing to the last episode of the season, which I really loved. So that's a
really good point. Yeah. There's couple of like bits of interesting mirroring here, like Vesemir and Ciri together. That had way more power than I thought it would. Those two characters together. Like, first of all, so Ciri has this great moment where she's looking at the Cintran scarf that she managed to keep with her, and that is a really powerful symbol of home. And this is her new home, sort of, but it's also Vesemir and Geralt's home. So twice she lives through her new home gets invaded immediately, which is something that Vesemir hadn't seen since the keep was destroyed, over 100 years ago. So this to him is like really meaningful that now his home has been invaded twice, although they were very far apart. And that's a huge point to establishing that nothing and nowhere is safe. They have to face these problems, not run from them.
And he's basically the Sherlock Holmes of the Witcher, so he's going to want to find out the reason why. You know what I'm saying?
Good point.
He's not going to be like, oh, I don't want to know why this happened. He's a very inquisitive person.
Here's a really good end line from Geralt. He says, "Power and purpose, a chance to survive the horror." And that's a really good way to like tie everything up in the episode, because he's talking to Ciri, but that's exactly what Yen, Francesca, and Fringilla were all looking for when they went to the Deathless Mother, or not went to. Well, that's what they were hoping to get. Like, Yen's a little wiser about it, but she still wants those things. She just doesn't want them from the Deathless Mother. Francesca and Fringilla are like, all right, this is my one chance to get what I need. Power and purpose, a chance to survive the horror. Yeah. So it's very well,
and
it's very
kind of
succinct.
Like, it is a little bit like, keep your expectations low. Story.
We're talking about surviving.
It's not going to get better than that.
Yeah, we're not talking about thriving. We're talking about surviving.
Yeah. It's going to be horrible. Like, horrible.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, actually, I think it was Aziz, you pointed out a lot of the rats references
Oh yeah.
in Kaer Morhen, and that
Having watched it again, there were like 5 times where the camera was only on a rat or 2 rats and then nothing else. Like, rats, eh? Ciri. And they're always like around Ciri, like Ciri and the rats, eh? What's that about?
Without spoiling too much, for those of you who haven't read the books, rats are important.
Yeah, people who've read the books know exactly what that means. If you don't, you will know when it happens.
One thing that I think we should also talk, we talk a little bit about the CGI and the fights and stuff. Man, wow. Geralt and Vesemir fighting how should I say it? Leschko. I don't know. Leschko together.
It's got 3 of the same letters. It's 5 letters long and 3 of the letters the same. So, yeah.
And, you're Leshy Cal. So, but I thought that was great, like the hooks and them kind of working in unison. Like you could definitely obviously season 1 had great choreography, but you can just definitely tell they turned it up a notch, and there's all sorts of different great angles. You know what I mean? Like, Aziz, you had mentioned kind of the different kind of shots with Tissaye and Kahir. There's definitely some of those great angles in this shot too, from the Leshy perspective, and Eskel and Vesemir and Geralt. So I really loved how the camera work really worked for that.
Yeah, they did this really weird thing where cool. I say weird because I don't remember ever seeing anything like it. I'm not a super observant guy on camera angles, but when Geralt rolls over the table, the camera rolls with him. Like it goes upside down with him. Like it flips at the same. And I was like, that was really neat. Like I don't think I've seen something like that before.
Yeah. They had some really interesting, kind of like this is a witchery fight stuff. Like they kind of put their stamp on it. Like they did use some of the Sherlocky Holmes kind of slow-mo stuff later in the season, but I definitely like the kind of more like visceral, like, oh, we're in the moment, like really following what's going on.
Are we ready for the funny moments? Do we have any other main discussion points? I got to say, folks, we did quite a good job of keeping each episode review at almost exactly an hour. So,
I think overall, I just want to say that obviously we're going to be reviewing 2 episodes per episode we do of this. For the pod, it's probably going to be split up into each part. You know what I mean? Just so it's more concise for you guys to be able to go and listen to that. And if you haven't checked out our podcast, anchor.fm, I'm just going to post it here in the comment section for you guys. We have a playlist of episodes for you guys to go check out. But
yeah,
basically overall, I felt like the way they started off with these first 2 episodes, we're only getting 8 episodes of The Witcher. They can only fit so much into these episodes. And I was like, well, damn, they really started us off with quite a lot in the first 2 episodes. They really hit us with 2 big, powerful, emotional episodes. And I was like, okay, if this is kind of a determining factor for what we're going to see for the rest of the season. And I mean, guys, yeah, this season is intense, but the story only gets more serious and more impactful as the books go on. So I was really impressed how they hit us in these first 2 episodes. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah. And one other thing that we all, just for y'all to know, we kind of agreed off, when we talked about this ahead of time, that we really like how things were left at the end. We, even if they didn't take the right or agreeable path to get to certain plot lines, the way things were left at the end of the season was, I think all 3 of us agreed, was very strong. And we're not going to get into the specifics of that, but I wanted to set that up and lay that expectation so that we can kind of build towards why, and we'll be explaining that as we go.
Yeah, there's a lot of threads you can follow through the season that even if you don't like necessarily their origin point, they are objectively very important and play out really, really well.
For example, the Eskel stuff didn't like that much, but then we have the awesome, amazing cave scene with Vesemir and Geralt, which we'll talk about in our next review. So stuff like that gets set up. I feel like this season was a very set-up-y season in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree with you there.
I have 2 things to say. One, RIP to the poor sex worker who had the bad luck of getting paired up with Eskel.
Yep, bummer for her.
And I hated both these episodes because there was no Jaskier, so are terrible. And I will say that for the rest of the time.
Me and Michal were doing our private discussions before Aziz said he hadn't seen the season. We're like, Jaskier?
Like, where is he?
That's like that a really old Simpsons episode. Is like, look, if Poochie isn't on screen, everybody should be asking, "Where's Poochie?" It's like,
but then we get
Yaskier?
a shirtless Yaskier. Okay, so
Well, he worked out.
I wasn't that impressed.
What?
I don't know.
I didn't even. Wow.
I don't attach to bards because they're ripped. I attach to bards because they're bards.
It doesn't help though.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but like,
well, okay. At least did you like Geralt and his new kind of getup? At least like
no, I actually don't find Henry Cavill that attractive. He's just scary to me, to be honest.
Chat, we're gonna have to end this right now. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. It's just not realistic.
It's okay. Kate's gonna thirst in chat for us. We have enough.
Yeah, it's not like
we have enough people
to thirst elsewhere.
We have enough people that need to get a Witcher horny jail in the chat. So let's get some more funny moments.
Asha, not Yara, just said in the chat that the Ask Your Hair. I will have like 20 minutes of a thing to say about that.
we will do LVP, least valuable hairdo. I don't know, but
wig.
So we'll have our 4
LVB.
episodes, and then we'll have our wrap up of the season. Like I said, we'll do MVPs and LVPs. We can do that for costumes and hair and all that kind of stuff too. That'll be fun and chat. We can have a great time with that. And before we get into funny moments, we do have a Facebook group, the podcast Suprise. Come join us there. We have all sorts of discussions and stuff like that. So let's get to our last funny moments, and then we're gonna wrap this up.
So there's. When Yennefer wakes up in episode 1, she like looks around. She's like, "Fuck." When Fringilla wakes up in episode 2, she looks around and says, "Fuck." And then Yennefer says, "Finally, an honest response." Nice. So they're just building on the Geralt saying that. Last episode, everyone gets their chance to be like, "Fuck." It's an honest reaction.
I washed the basilisk blood out of your hair. It was wyvern blood.
Yeah, that was the poor sex worker who got killed, right?
No, she was madam.
Oh, it's a different one?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Oh, the madam. That's right. You're right. The madam did not get. Yeah. Okay. So
far as we know, they seem to have gotten out okay. The rest of them.
Yeah, and of course he's somewhat cold to her because he's like, they know who Ciri is now, and he's like, I'm supposed to be keeping her secret. Not only are we supposed to be kept secret, she's supposed to be kept secret, and now, like, can we trust these people not to talk? But what we can do about it? It's too late. It's not like we're gonna kill them, So like the secret's out. So yeah, that was just like, oops.
I mean, to be fair, they can't have come from that far away, and this can't be the first time that they have been visited by witchers nearby. So like,
yeah,
it's probably more of an open secret for them.
It's like an open secret that it's nearby, but apparently, listen to books, like the path is hard to find. The mountain pass is hard to find. So that's he may have showed them that, which now they know where it is. So I think that might be the implication, but I don't know. Because you're right, there's no way they couldn't be aware that it's somewhere in the vicinity, in the region at the very least. There's another book reference joke, which they do, as I've said, and as a lot of y'all notice, there's a lot of them. For like from that, like the dancing on the graves joke, and this one is when Geralt comes out and is like, "What about Ciri?" And Vesemir is like, "Oh yeah, she was pounding white gull and dancing on the table." Which, if you all remember, she drinks white gull in the book. In Blood of Elves, and goes into a trance. So and drops dark prophecies. So they're like, "Oh," and then Triss like gets on their case for giving her, like, you shouldn't be giving her hallucinogen. She's like, "No, it's a natural hallucinogen. It won't even affect your allergies because it's totally just grows that way. There's no magic involved." Black Gull is the one that he takes at the end of the one he takes at something more in the last episode of last season, which is where he's pouring it on his wounds, and after he got injured by the grave ears or whatever those were, the leg wound, and he's dying in Yoren's Yoren. I did it. I called him last game with his name. Yes. And
that'll go on our bloopers episode.
Yeah, right. So in his. Yeah, so all that. So anyway, so Black Gull and White Gull, those are little lore bits for you.
But yeah, overall, I think there was a nice mix of obviously funny elements as there is in The Witcher, but I felt that these first 2 episodes, like we were pretty lucky to get another short story, and we will talk about in the next coming episodes. We get kind of some Shard of Ice stuff, which is really
That was a
awesome.
surprise.
A nice
Pleasant
surprise, but we got the full grain of truth stuff, so that was really, really awesome, and I thought it was well done. And there we obviously will continue to talk about some of the issues we have with some of the Witcher kind of plot at Kaer Morhen, but it does set up quite a few awesome big moments, emotional moments for characters that we'll be talking about in our next review. So yeah, with that said, this has been really, really fun. Like I said, we've been waiting 2 years to do this, to cover the show. We said we were going to keep our promise and we were going to cover the show. There's going to be 4 of these where we do 2 episodes per, because there's 8 episodes of The Witcher for each season. And then we're going to do a big wrap-up episode. But if you do want to see more content from us, we got lots of YouTube videos here on the channel, of course, with our Witcher live streams. But we also have a podcast on Anchor, the podcast of Suprise. Surprise! We have a lot of episodes. So go check them out.
Yeah, let me shout out our supporters. These are people who give us a monthly donation, signed up through Anchor to do that. It's Mara Ann, Rhett Krisman, James G, Ryan, School of the Cat, Barry Watson, Lucas M, Robert B, LC, and Amy Blackfire. Thank you so much, y'all. We don't require money to do this show, but it is nice and it does encourage us to do even more. We would do it without, but it certainly does give us a little boost, a little motivating boost, gives a little validation, and helps us, put more time into it, because, we have to earn a living elsewhere. So it does help. We appreciate it.
If you do want to support, there's a $1 option, $5 option, and $10 option. There's a support button right on anchor.fm. And you can listen on all sorts of different platforms. You go to anchor.fm, Spotify, Apple, iTunes. It's kind of all embedded there for you guys to go check out. So whatever platform you like to listen on, if it's Pocket Cast, then you can go do that. It's all there for you on Anchor. And Anchor is great. We really, really recommend that. Also, one thing really want to recommend is these guys. Okay, Aziz and Michal, they're great. If you go in the description of this video, you will find links to Michal's Twitter. She's a prolific writer. Okay, she's got great podcasts of her own. I'm gonna let her talk a little bit about that though. Okay, so Michal, please spiel for us.
Sure. Thank you.
You made it a verb. You made spiel a verb. That's great. I approve. I totally approve.
You can find me on Twitter, Ink as Rain, and I also am currently doing a podcast called Nice Jewish Fangirls, which is exactly what it sounds like. The Level 7 Access podcast, which is it started as an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast. Now we talk about all things Marvel, Star Wars, Disney Plus, that kind of thing. We will probably be covering Book of Boba Fett, although to be honest, so I don't know. But and of course Vassals of Kingsgrave is the the OG original fandom podcast. So yeah, thank you.
Song of Ice and Fire family, of course. If you like the Marvel stuff, I encourage to go check out the WandaVision stuff. And as a fellow Marvel fan, we got all those Disney Plus shows come out. So showing love to another community member is always awesome. But you can find Michal's links in the description of the video. Twitter @Ink is Rain. Okay, and then we have Aziz.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Yeah, we're doing our thing over at History of Westeros. We restarted at Valerie Regis. We're doing the World of Ice and Fire right now, so that's fun. We're lining up a lot of different guests because the World of Ice and Fire is full of rabbit holes. So I'm bringing on some subject matter experts, people who are good at things, who have knowledge outside of A Song of Ice and Fire, but also A Song of Ice and Fire knowledge. So that should be a lot of fun. And everything else is just going swimmingly over there. So our episodes keep rolling out. So if you haven't checked it out lately, good time to come on back.
Yeah, we got some interesting things that we'll be doing with the podcast here. You'll probably be seeing more content from us, of course. Like I said, these 2 episodes will probably be split into 2. But like I said, you can find us on the podcast Surprise. I'm currently still moving into my new place. So as you can see, my setup is not as nice as you usually see it. I'm actually using a different mic than I usually use, but you can expect more content coming from me for The Witcher soon.
Yeah, and, shout out to you, Kyle. You got a lot going on right now. You've had to move. You've had personal stuff going on. It's completely out of your control. Obviously, we're all dealing with COVID on top of that. So we appreciate your being able to make all this work despite that.
Yeah, it's been Anyways,
a lot. We'll just
yeah.
say that, a lot.
And that's why I'm so thankful to have two amazing podcast co-hosts like Michal and Aziz. But with that said, all the fuzzy and warmies can happen. I don't want to get too emotional here. But I am so happy that The Witcher Season 2 is back. I know all of you are so excited. Like I said, Podcast Surprise on Facebook. Come hang out in our Facebook group. We have all sorts of discussions. I usually do like a thread before we go live, kind of like we can talk about spoilers and all sorts of different stuff. And we have like an event page where I make sure, we kind of just update you when we're going to go live next at Pod of Surprise on Twitter. If you want to follow us there, or you want to follow us on our own social medias, you can find that all in the description of the video, and look out for more Witcher content coming from us soon. And we just want to thank everyone for coming here on Saturday night. You could have been anywhere else. You're here with us, and we're really, really excited. Like I said, we've been waiting 2 years for this to happen with The Witcher Season 2. And we're happy to be back covering the show. So thank you so much, everyone. We hope that you're all having a great time wherever you are on the continent. Of course, be safe because COVID is still rampant out there. And we highly encourage you to come back to listen to our next episode. So thanks, everyone. And you guys all have a great night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.